This essay differs from the previous ones. The previous essays set out reasons and conditions for the experiment and laid out its parameters. In this essay, we look at how to apply what we have learned in a way that will produce verifiable results, i.e., experimentally. The experiment laid out here requires the use of a particular social model or organization. This organization or test group cannot share any of the attributes of the control group structures. If the state is not compatible with the needs of the experiment and the church has not been constructed according to the guidelines in the Bible, what can be harnessed to the needs of the experiment? What does the experiment test if everything we observe is part of the control group? The experiment needs a new organizational model. But if the results are to be trusted, the test group must not be contaminated with elements of the control group. This requires the two organizations be divided cleanly and completely. This a tall order, but if we cannot ensure sterility in the test group, the results will be contaminated by cross-contamination by the control group, and whatever results we get will be inconclusive. The need for surgical separation between control and test group was discussed in the earlier videos. The dividing line is the line between faith and fear. Faith is an abstraction linked to absolute or a priori truth. We can only have faith in what we believe in, and we can only truly believe in absolute a priori truth. We cannot have faith in lies or liars. So, the test group is hemmed in by severe moral boundaries. There may be things that are contingent and relativistic, but we cannot believe in them fully, which is why materialists are cultural relativists. In short, the experiment must test the performance of faith and those who live in faith, compared to contingent systems. Babylon is a world system grounded in fear and the appreciation of risk assessment strategies. Babylonians are all about handling and containing fear. The present world system is the control group. The world lives off of fear. The question then must arise as to how does a test group defeat fear to form a new world and indeed a new reality based in faith, divorced in a substantial way from the control group? If the modern church was not deeply enmeshed in the institutions of this world, the experiment would need to be done. The church would have proved the claims laid out here already. At most we would have the data already, needing only to quantify some feature of the church. As it is, the church has excluded itself from consideration, as the test group, by its adoption of so many of Babylon's features. The experiment is as much a condemnation of the Babylonian system as it is a demonstration of the power of God's word. To have faith is to produce works of faith that build communities of faith, or what we refer to as a trust. Trusts are the fruit that are produced by works of faith. Trust is not dead works, but the perfectibility of man. James 2 verses 14-18. What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith, and have not works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked, and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, Depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? Even so faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Yea, a man may say, Thou hast faith, and I have works, shew me thy faith without thy works, and I will shew thee my faith by my works. A trust is built by the perfection of the believer in a faith that is corporate. True works of faith build value because it is the production of value that is the true test of a work that produces fruit. In the vernacular, works of faith produce specialization. This is very important to understand because all progress and growth to perfection is due to specialization. Faith may appear to be an emotional state, in fact, it is a cultural element. If we have faith, we are part of a particular culture, a particular way of life based on works of faith. Faith is a precise condition that undergirds all growth in civilization. Without faith, we do have the law of nature and are reduced to a state of nature and the survival of the fittest. One error Christians make is in thinking faith is specific to man's relationship with God. But faith in God without faith in the people of God is not possible. Our faith in God is exhibited in our works of faith, which are cultural activities. Works of faith build a culture of faith. Works of faith cannot bear the fruit of culture if we refuse to have any contact with our fellow believers. Works of faith build the church as explained in the Bible. We just need to remember the church is the body of believers and indeed the culture they create, not a meeting hall. And if this body of believers are bearing fruit, they are helping one another in specialized ways. In short, the church is a community of believers, in the widest possible sense of the term. Christian culture is created by works of faith, which not only perfect the believer but perfect the body of believers which he or she is part of. The works of faith bear fruit, which is the perfection of the body of believers as a perfect way of life. It is this phenomenon the experiment studies and measures. The perfectibility of the community of believers is quantified by means of the equity works of faith produce. In short, the experiment postulates an index by which the perfectibility of culture can be established, studied, quantified, and compared. There is no perfect man without a perfect culture, for it is the culture that defines the perfectibility of the citizen. The key to establishing a Christian culture, or a culture of perfectibility, is faith. It is the faith of the test group that holds the key to the success of the experiment. And so, the experimenter must figure out how to measure faith. The first step is to establish a starting point, a state of no faith. This is needed to calibrate the scale we will use. If faith is the key, then trust as the product of faith serves as our starting point. It was said that works of faith build the fruits of faith, which we equated with a culture. But cultures are built on institutions. As a correlate of the culture of faith, we have established an institution of faith called a trust. Trusts are the product of works of faith. Faith builds trust, and trust is manifested as an institution called a trust. The key to demonstrating the existence of God is the judiciary or justice system. The market really is a system of justice that allocates goods and services appropriately according to supply and demand. It is the justice system that holds the key to our prosperity and our legitimacy. But the legitimacy of our judiciary depends on the potential for reconciliation. If the judiciary cannot ensure the reconciliation of accounts, justice is unavailable. The experiment relies on a justice system that is able to reconcile account and bring everything to perfection. The monetary system and method of accounting of a trust is fully reconcilable. This is mentioned because the monetary system used by the Babylonian system or control group does have a reconcilable system of accounts. The trust is created by faith or by works of faith. A trust is created by an act of faith. It takes a minimum of 3 persons to perform the works of faith that build a trust. A work of faith is a specific type of work that adds value to assets and, in fact, creates a culture of faith. Perfecting faith adds value to assets, but does not create risk or represent a liability or threat of loss. Thus, a culture of faith drives out fear and eliminates the Babylonian culture of fear. Faith drives out fear, so works of faith remove all sources of risk. This is a systematic process. Systematic change requires a system or method of operation, what is often called an algorithm. Works of faith builds trust as a cultural element. Faith is the mental or spiritual condition, and trust the corporate or social manifestation of faith. To trust others requires we engage with them in a cultural setting. To have or claim to have faith in God without trusting the people of God is incoherent, but to claim to have faith in others without this impacting how one lives is also incomprehensible. To permit others to impact your life without this impact becoming cultural is not possible. Therefore, the person who has faith in God has a life lived in the cultural environment of a trust, which represents and manifests man's faith in his Creator. It takes more than one person to build a culture. We cannot defeat God. If we believe in God, we have to follow His way, because His truth cannot be compromised. The key to building trust in others is to perform works of faith. It takes an act of faith to establish trust. And the fruit of these acts is a culture of faith, or a trust. Positions of ownership are positions victims assume to ward off risk. An ownership claim over assets is a prison in which one feels their level of risk has been reduced. If a victim owns commercial assets, they feel protected from others, that is, from the threat that others represent to them. If I invite you into my business as an employee, I have power over you, so I feel safer than were we on an equal footing. To create trust and to live in faith necessitates removing these protective elements we have created to provide distance between us and others. The primary protective covering is our ownership rights to assets, or what Babylon calls commercial property. Commercial property is transferred to a trust which represents the faith we have. It is the value of the trust that quantifies our faith and measures the success of the experiment. The value of the assets transferred gives us the relative success of the experiment, and the rate of growth of these assets gives us our absolute measure of success. As more assets are transferred to the trust, more goods and services are produced by the trust, compared to Babylon. The trust will see exponential growth as it creates a self-reinforcing cycle. As more assets are integrated, more goods and services are made available, which encourages more integration, which weakens and dismantles the Babylonian market.